Hello, welcome to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor with Miles Hassell, MD. This is an evidence-based podcast for people who want to use lifestyle choices to avoid preventable illness, as well as to treat illness. Listeners will learn the choices that work for better health outcomes for themselves, the ones that they love, and the patients they care for. We want to see patients liberated from the burden of chronic disease whenever possible. Welcome back to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor, the podcast with me. I'm Miles Hassell, MD, and this is episode 13, and we're going to be talking about the real superfoods. The real superfoods are the ones that are already probably in your kitchen. And so we're going to be talking about that and how they might be able to help your health, and we're going to be concentrating on something called apple cider vinegar to start with. And just as background, remember that we really enjoy hearing from you. The address is on our website. And we really appreciate all the donations we've received that allow this podcast to continue. Our donors fund the work of equipping thousands of clinicians and patients around the world for how to make our lives better through using the tools that make our health better. Inexpensive tools that you already have accessible to you that can transform your future. So, and that includes, if the information in this podcast is useful, it includes, of course, making this podcast available to everybody through the donations. So thank you. So when you think about superfoods, a lot of people think of something that came in a bottle at a high price from a salesman. And that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the real superfoods. And the real superfoods are things like fish, lentils and beans, leafy greens, nuts, olive oil, whole grains, probiotic foods like sauerkraut and yogurt and kefir, cruciferous vegetables, legumes, tomatoes, real food. And there's nothing too magic about it. The important thing to remember about the whole concept of superfoods is the literature is really poor quality. And if you don't appreciate that about the whole issue of lifestyle medicine, then you're going to be easily confused. But before we talk about superfoods, let's remind ourselves that lifestyle data and food data for health outcomes is, generally speaking, pretty poor quality. And the reason for that is all kinds of observational data with lots and lots of confounding variables, difficulty in doing good randomized control trials, and so on. So we always suggest avoiding any lifestyle data for your health that doesn't have at least 3 lines of evidence supporting it, 3 lines of reasonable evidence, 3 lines of reasonably solid evidence. But remembering that any one of those lines may be in and of itself pretty shaky. And that is a generalization that is pretty safe in the whole area of lifestyle medicine. A little humility goes a long way. At the same time, if you don't apply lifestyle medicine to the extent that we have knowledge, then you're also going to be missing the best opportunity to improve your health. So those 2 concepts can be a little contradictory in some people's minds, but it isn't contradictory if you use multiple lines of evidence. So when we're collecting data on lifestyle medicine, we're mostly using observational data, some randomized control trials, and often those randomized control trials are quite short-term, meaning months or even weeks. And that's not enough to collect good long-term outcomes data for humans. Now, there is lifestyle medicine data, for example, the Leo Heart trial that went for 4 years and numerous trials of that nature, but they are the minority. A second thing is confounding variables. When we're talking about apple cider vinegar, for example, the people who use that might also use more blueberries or lettuce or kale, any number of things that might be different for them than for people who use less. And that's called a confounding variable and really needs to be taken into account. There's recall issues. If you ask people what they've eaten, they may tell the investigator what they think the investigator wants to hear. They may be talking about what they would like to have eaten, and they may simply be lying. So the issues of recall are pretty significant as well. Food prep. One person will call their red meat intake a hamburger at a fast food place. Another person, their red meat intake is a pot roast with vegetables at home. those are probably quite different populations, and they will therefore lead to quite different results, even though they're both listed as red meat. And people are hard to corral, harder than cats. And so the difficulty in doing good studies, especially randomized controlled trials where you're saying to people, hey, use this much of this food for this long every day, is likely to get a lot of pushback from the clientele. And of course, the patients may not tell you that they're actually not using it. And so all of these factors should make you wary and cynical regarding lifestyle medicine information. And we're hoping to clean some of that up. So when we talk about apple cider vinegar, it's a poster child for this kind of variability. However, it has one really useful foundational characteristic, and that is it's been used for the entire recorded history of humankind. You read about apple cider vinegar in the Bible. You read about apple cider vinegar in ancient Japanese literature. And when we say apple cider vinegar, we're often also including other forms of vinegar which probably have similar properties, but most of the studies that we have available to us are in the apple cider version. However, they all have similar acids in them, and that's why we suspect that the data can be combined. When we're making apple cider vinegar specifically, of course, it involves crushed apples, typically a couple of different fermentations leading to somewhere around 4 or 5% acetic acid, most commonly, plus a whole bunch of other nutrients. Because we really don't know which qualities are the most important, whether it's the acid itself or other nutrients that are packaged with the acid, then we would suggest sticking to the what we call the muddy apple cider vinegars. So the ones that have goop at the bottom, mud at the bottom, that you have to shake before you use. Sometimes people refer to this as the mother, and so we assume that has better properties. But already you can hear me saying, we assume, we suspect, and that should warn you that how shaky this literature is. And so when you're thinking about that and thinking about using apple cider vinegar, you're saying, this stuff may have the health properties that we'll be talking about in a moment, has a lot of literature supporting it historically. It's already in my kitchen, and where's the downside? And so that's often a feature that we have to support the use of some of these lifestyle medicine tools. And so does it help? When we think about what apple cider vinegar does, we can sort of think about, first of all, apple cider vinegar's effect on the blood sugar. So numerous studies have been used over months in randomized controlled trials, showing anywhere from about a 0.5% improvement in HbA1c to about a 1.5% improvement in HbA1c, using somewhere maybe a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar a day. The apple cider vinegar can be used any number of ways. A lot of people put it in salad dressing. Some people would have it in a tall glass of water by itself, just diluted to taste. Other people would put it in sparkling water in summer, which actually kind of makes a nice, refreshing drink. And other people would add a little bit of honey or maple syrup just for improved flavor. It doesn't really take much. Probably a half a teaspoon is enough for most of us. So you get this data for improved blood sugar, and you say, these are pretty variable studies. True enough, but that's because humans are pretty variable. However, they're fairly consistent in their hint of benefit. So when we're thinking about the mechanisms by which apple cider vinegar might improve blood sugar, then there are interesting muscle studies that show that people who ingest apple cider vinegar have more apparent readiness to absorb glucose into their muscle cells. In other words, it reduces the problem that we call insulin resistance. And that's very plausible. The other mechanism of apple cider vinegar that's really interesting is the possibility it improves the microbiome. So these are the bugs in your gut. And it improves, numerous studies have shown that apple cider vinegar and red wine, as a matter of fact, improve the content of your, the bacterial content of your intestinal tract. And what we have from numerous lines of evidence is improvements in mood, improvements in obesity, blood sugar, various metabolic outcomes, everything including heart disease and so on. So the microbiome effect of apple cider vinegar may actually be more important than things like glucose uptake of muscle cells. And when we're thinking about this, always be thinking about how much work is it to go to include a lifestyle measure, and what outcomes are you looking for? And so something like apple cider vinegar that doesn't require any real investment of time or money, that seems to have multiple benefits and has plausible mechanisms of action, is far more worthwhile considering than something that is expensive and takes more work. In the show notes, you'll also see data suggesting improvements in triglycerides and other lipid variables, probably through, once again, the same mechanisms, the microbiome and glucose uptake from cells. One of the other interesting aspects that we have for apple cider vinegar is all the anecdotal reports that are in the literature and in our own patients. And none of these have solid supporting evidence from any kind of trials. But the most common one we hear is people who use apple cider vinegar to reduce their reflux, their heartburn, their peptic disease. And this is really super counterintuitive. I mean, why would you take an acid to reduce an acid-caused illness, right? That's kind of dumb. And yet, people all around the world take apple cider vinegar when they get acid reflux and find that it improves. Are they making it up? They might be, but we don't think so because there's way too many people that tell us about this. And many people in our own office actually use it for that purpose. Muscle cramps. People take apple cider vinegar, 1 or 2 tablespoons per day for muscle cramps. Is it the potassium? Is it something made up? Is it a placebo effect? We don't know. But it sure beats using a real drug, in my opinion. And something that has more evidence is depression and niacin metabolism. So this, it was study done in university students. And the university students that were randomized to apple cider vinegar had improvements in mood and improvements in metabolic factors that suggested a change in their niacin metabolism. So this is all pretty plausible stuff. But once again, where's the downside? If you've got a mood disorder, why not try it out? Tablespoon per day, diluted to taste, and see what happens. Your mood might be better. Your microbiome might be better. Your blood sugar might be better. And if none of those things really do improve, you haven't lost a thing. And this is the way you sort of have to think about some of these aspects of lifestyle medicine. You have to be willing to say, can I try this for a few months and see what kind of changes I see? Have something in mind. How's your energy? How's your mood? How are your blood sugars? And be willing to give things a try, even things that are based on fairly sketchy evidence. Thank you for listening to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor. It's a production of greatmed.org. I'm Miles Hassell, MD. I'm a practicing physician in Portland, Oregon. Our website is greatmed.org. The book is Good Food, Great Medicine. I wrote that with my sister. And the podcast is Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor. Thank you.